and the earth was without form. And void and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Legendary evangelist Charles Spurgeon explains, when God began to arrange this world in order, it was shrouded in darkness, and it had been reduced to what we call, for want of a better name, chaos. This is just the condition of every soul of man when God begins to deal with him in His grace. It is formless and empty of all good things. There is none righteous, no, not one. There is none that understandeth. There is none that seeketh after God. They are all gone out of the way. Spurgeon adds, this was the first act of God in preparing this planet to be the abode of man. And the first act of grace in the soul is for the Spirit of God to move within it. How that Spirit of God comes there, we know not, we cannot tell how He acts. Even as we cannot tell how the wind bloweth where it listeth. But until the Spirit of God moves upon the soul, nothing is done towards its new creation in Christ Jesus. GotQuestions.com explains the Hebrew tohu is typically translated as without form or formless, and bohu is rendered void or empty. Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 could be translated as it came about that the earth was without form and empty. However, in an attempt to try to understand God's creation through a secular lens, many have put theories and observations forth about this particular part of creation, including a period of missing time and history between the first two verses. Got Questions explains that this view, often called the gap theory, there was a long period of time, a gap, between what happened in Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 and 2. Thomas Chalmers, who is credited with popularizing the gap theory, stated his opinion in 1814 that it forms no part of the first day, but refers to a period of indefinite antiquity when God created the worlds out of nothing. The commencement of the first day's work I hold to be the moving of God's Spirit upon the face of the waters. We can allow geology the amplest time, without infringing even on the literalities of the Mosaic record. Personally, I know people who adhere to the gap theory and are okay with such a perspective. Without question, we cannot explain everything, nor should we desire to do so. But the gap theory and other similar popular ideas come about as a result of trying to explain God without the Bible and godly characteristic. Instead, they replace God and His Word with secular thoughts and ideas. And this is a recipe for disaster. Got Questions continues with the simplest and most historically held position prior to Chalmers and other gap advocates was that the representation of the earth as without form and void was simply an expression of stages of progress during the first day, and not a statement of condition prior to the creation week, and concludes that, in that non-gap understanding, there is no attempt to explain the appearance of age, and no special consideration for any theological implications. Advocates of the non-gap interpretation might simply assert that everything created had the appearance of age. For example, Adam was created as a man, capable of speech and critical thought. He obviously wasn't created as an infant, hence the appearance of age. The same could be said of trees, mountains, etc. Proponents of the non-gap understanding generally don't sense a theological need or exegetically reason to insert a gap of time between the two verses, and conclude that to do so would be an argument from silence, and not based on sound interpretive principles. Bible Study Tools breaks down the verse, and the earth was without form and void, it was not in the form it now is, otherwise it must have a form. As all matter has, it was a fluid matter. The watery parts were not separated from the earthy ones, it was not put into the form of a terraqueous globe it is now, the sea apart, and the earth by itself, but were mixed. and blended together it was, as both the Targums of Jonathan and Jerusalem paraphrase it, a waste and desert, empty and destitute of both men and beasts. And it may be added, of fishes and fowls, and also of trees, herbs, and plants. It was, as Ovid calls it, a chaos and an indigested mass of matter. And Hesiod makes a chaos first to exist, and then the wide extended earth. And so Orpheus, and others, and this is agreeably to the notion of various nations. The Chinese make a chaos to be the beginning of all things, out of which the immaterial being God made all things that consist of matter, which they distinguish into parts they call yin and yang, the one signifying hidden or imperfect, the other open or perfect. And so the Egyptians, according to Diodorus Siculus, whose opinion he is supposed to give, thought the system of the universe had but one form, the heaven and earth, and the nature of them, being mixed and blended together, until by degrees they separated and obtained the form they now have. And the Phoenicians, as Sanchoniathon relates, supposed the principle of the universe to be a dark and windy air, or the blast of a dark air, and a turbid chaos surrounded with darkness, as follows. And darkness was upon the face of the deep, the whole fluid mass of earth and water mixed together. This abyss is explained by waters in the next clause, which seem to be uppermost. And this was all a dark turbid chaos, as before expressed, without any light or motion, till an agitation was made by the Spirit, as is next observed. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, which covered the earth. Psalms chapter 104 verse 6, the earthy particles being heaviest sunk lower, and the waters being lighter rose up above the others. Hence Thales the philosopher makes water to be the beginning of all things, as do the Indian Brahmins. And Aristotle himself owns that this was the most ancient opinion concerning the origin of the universe, and observes that it was not only the opinion of Thales, but of those that were the most remote from the then present generation in which he lived, and of those that first wrote on divine things, and it is frequent in Hesiod and Homer to make Oceanus, or the ocean, with Tethys, to be the parents of generation. And so the Scriptures represent the original earth as standing out of the water, and consisting of it, 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 5. And upon the surface of these waters, before they were drained off the earth, the Spirit of God moved, which is to be understood not of a wind, as Onkelos, Ibn Ezra, and many Jewish writers, as well as Christians, interpret it, since the air, which the wind is a motion of, was not made until the second day. The Targums of Jonathan and Jerusalem call it the Spirit of Mercies, and by it is meant the Spirit of the Messiah, as many Jewish writers call him, that is, the third person in the blessed Trinity, who is concerned in the creation of all things, as in the garnishing of the heavens, so in bringing the confused matter of the earth and water into form and order. See Job chapter 26 verse 13.